I'm going to turn this over to our host, Adiola, who's going to introduce. Have fun today. This is Stop Stigma Day 3. Uh,
Yeah. Good morning, everyone. My name is Ade Ola Adeniyi. Thank you again for serving. Thank you for coming to our section today as part of the Stop the Stigma conference hosted by the Community and Maxi Educational Services. At Stop the Stigma, we acknowledge the importance of person first language because language shapes how we understand one another. Person first language centers humanity over diagonals or system involvement and reflects our shared commitment to dignity, respect, and equity. We also recognize that individuals may prefer identity first language, and we encourage speakers and participants to honor personal preference whenever possible. We will also like to begin with a language acknowledgement. Although this conference is held virtually, we acknowledge the indigenous people whose lands we occupy as we gather, learn, and collaborate. The community is headquartered in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, on the traditional homeland of the Ochuk Nation, the Manning Nation, and the Potawatomi nations, with enduring ties to Ojibwe and Odawa people of the Council of the Three Fires. Moxie Educational Service is based in New Hampshire on the ancestral land of Abenaki and Pennacock people, whose history, culture, and sovereignty continue today. We honor their resilience, ongoing contributions, and enduring relationship to the land. This acknowledgement is only a beginning. We encourage all attendees to learn about the indigenous nation whose land they reside on and to support ongoing efforts towards indigenous justice and sovereignty. Accessibility is shared responsibility. Thank you for helping create a conference culture rooted in respect, care, and openness. AXL interpreter are provided for each section and cast caption are activated. To support blind and deaf blind audience, we will begin with deaf virtual description. I will go first and then invite each panelist to do the same. I am a woman with a long hair. I am wearing a pink shirt. I am wearing a purple shirt and a long gown and a black long gown. In front of me is my laptop and my background is cream color with beautiful flowers. And I'm going to hand over right now to Jennifer to introduce herself. Over to you, Jennifer Dubash.
Um, so I am Jennifer. I have brownish blonde hair. I have a black shirt with a necklace. My background is a variety of things because this is my office, and I have a lot of technical equipment in my office. Um,
Hi, I am Ben Wright. I am deaf. I'm going to voice for this panel. I 38-year-old man with a bald head, goatee, kind of, glasses, and a black shirt with a logo that says the community. And my background is a uh, curtain that beige, maybe white.
Thank you. So additional reminder, chat is open and encouraged. Please help keep it respectfully and inclusive. Zoom microphones and cameras will be off for attendees by default. If access need arise during the section, please pursue and flag them. Once these steps are complete, you may begin your section content. Thank you for helping us model what accessible and value-driven convening can look like. If you have any question before or during the conference, please do not hesitate to reach out. Over to you, Ben.
Awesome. Thank you so much. That is a very personal lesson for me. I will let Jennifer introduce herself, of course. Um, this is a discussion about vocational rehabilitation, and I'm going, again, let her introduce herself first, and then I'll talk about why it's personal to me. And then we'll get into a conversation about vocational rehabilitation back and forth. That's how this panel roundtable is start off today. So, Jennifer, if you could introduce yourself, who you are, and all the awesome things that you've done over the years.
I'm Jennifer, JD. And I have been working in vocational rehabilitation for 30 years. My expertise lies in deafness, hard of hearing, deaf blind, but I also am very experienced with mental health and then those with, oh, I'll say autism spectrum disorder / communication. I worked in the state of Ohio, and then I work with a federal program called I Can Connect, and I work with individuals who are deaf blind specific and help them connect in the community with telecommunication devices. I've had an interesting history with working with individuals who have all forms of life experience. And so I've gotten to meet some amazing human beings, and along with a great employers who have stretched their knowledge, opened themselves up to working with individuals with disabilities.
So this panel is all about vocational rehabilitation, what Jennifer does, what it's all about. So I'm not going to go too in depth about myself, but I am Ben Wright. I am the director of disability access and prison education at the community. I'm currently working on my PhD. I just finished my CAMP courses and starting my dissertation right after this conference is over. I'm looking forward to that. Um, by trade, I was a special education teacher for about 10 years. And then, full disclosure, I was incarcerated in 2018 and got out in 2022. And that leads to why this is personal for me. When I was nearing the end of my incarceration, I realized that I was going to have issues with re-entry and finding employment and things like that. So I am lucky enough that my mother worked for the opportunity for hiring with disabilities, and she had a vast amount of knowledge and understanding of how the system works. So she was the one that poking me every single day to contact the VR services in Ohio. And I did that, and I was connected to a deaf woman who worked out of Toledo, which was about 3 hours away from me. So we worked virtually. But she connected me with Jennifer here, and Jennifer was part of my life and the hardest part. I I gotta admit, it was hard. It was harder than actually being in prison because I was stuck in my grandmother's house with no income or very little income. I was lucky enough to get a job at SNSU, but as a student worker, you're only paid, I think it was $9 an hour. So obviously, that's not livable wage. So Jennifer and I were working together to try to figure out how to find employment for myself. And as I went through that experience, I thought about a lot of the students that I've worked with over the years. So maybe we can take a step back, Jen, and really help our audience understand what vocational rehabilitation is in the first place. I talked about myself and how I was looking for employment and other reentry opportunities. I had the fortune of having housing already, and my car, which was the car that I had prior, I had some ability to pay for things, but VR did pay for my the assessment that I took for in SHRM, which was the Human Resources um, assessment and certification and things like that. But maybe you can talk about how that all happened for me and what it's like for others who are currently or formerly incarcerated and what vocational rehabilitation is all about.
So, our federal government requires through RSA, Rehabilitation Services Administration, that each state has a vocational rehabilitation program. And I'll use VR for short because that's what we all say. And so each state has an established program. Ohio is opportunities for Ohioans with disabilities. But again, RSA does not mandate how you run the program. There are certain ways that they expect you to. And so VR is a way to support individuals with disabilities in finding employment. I, in particular, it's very important for me to put the the importance on a good job match because we want an individual to go in and be successful. Not everyone is the same, but for me, a good match is really important. Now, if you would be incarcerated, the most important thing is that you apply for services. And I would recommend applying probably 6 months before you're ready to, 6 to 8 months before you know that you're going to be going home. And the reason I say that is because anytime you're working with a government entity, nothing is fast. And while each state has a requirement, timelines, sometimes things fall through the cracks. There are things that need to be done before you have what we call an open case. And then to determine what services are needed. Most states have an online application, and I really encourage you to use the online application as that is a way to start tracking. If you send in a paper application or call someone, it's a chance that things could fall through the cracks easier. So if you can fill out the online application, I really encourage. States also have an order of selection. And it doesn't come into play as much unless there's funding issues, wait lists, which states do have wait lists. And that's why I say to apply 8 to 6 months. If you know your state and where they are in that, I would apply earlier than later. Order of selection is where they look at, Ohio in particular has disabled, significantly disabled, and most significantly disabled. And that has to do with the barriers. Sadly, Ben would probably be considered just disabled. not most significantly disabled. And so that gets to be a little frustrating about what they view as barriers. And they are ordered to serve most significantly disabled first. So Ohio in particular hasn't had an issue with that. Recently, there's been a little bit when the government shut down. It did impact our VR, our state VRs. But so once you're active, open case, then they meet with you and they develop an individualized employment plan. The employment plan is the driving force of what you need to be successful, essentially. So that could be anywhere from training, that could be a bus pass, that could be I need interpreting services, gas. Occasionally, some states will do gas cards. It's to the point where you might need a job coach or a job developer. It's literally whatever you think you need to be successful. I highly encourage people who have a background to do the check. For the VR system to do a background check, because not everyone knows specifically what it is, especially when we work with our deaf folks, because they really don't understand what they've been charged with, the specific language. And sometimes we really have to push our state VR to do background checks. And it's just very important when you're looking for an employer that you know exactly what is the background check, or what's why you were incarcerated. Once you've met with your state VR, you have an open case, then you move into whatever is the next step. Most states do a type of job seeking skills and help develop your resume. And this is really important because this is where you practice. How are you going to tell an employer your history? How are you going to explain it? And as Ben knows, how long has it been? And what have you proven to be achieving now? And I know, Ben, you faced a lot of barriers with that. It hasn't been long enough. What are you achieving? It can be very frustrating. We do have employers in Ohio who are open to hiring people with a background, and some are not. So once you start practicing, developing your resume, and then you start the job search. So that's where I come in, where I do job seeking skills. You create a resume, and then it's an important thing to network and know who your employers are out there. Knowing what jobs will be a good match. There is an opportunity, and I always say take it, to do a vocational evaluation where it really comes down to learning what your skill set is and being able to describe it and understanding how to explain those skills. I would encourage everyone to do that. I think it's never a bad thing to really deep dive into what can I do? What do I know? Would an education or some type of certification help me find a job faster? Because we know that the longer you don't have money, the more frustrating it is. And we don't want to see any recidivism at all. It happens. But being able to get a job quickly is very important. For our deaf individuals, understanding that you still have to tell people that you were in jail is really hard because they feel like, oh, I don't have to talk about it anymore. It isn't always, well, we know that's not the truth. Um, so it can be frustrating to find um, that job, that company that will hire you. And ensuring you have transportation and you have a uniform and you have the correct shoes and the correct clothing. And that's all something that VR can assist with purchasing. I've had purchased hearing aids, glasses, uniforms. Um, we've had them, it's very rare, but we've had them even repair vehicles for our folks. Um, and it's just really important. Now, if you are released and you have Social Security, whether it be SSDI or SSI, which are two very separate um, programs, working with your VR counselor to get a benefits analysis so that you know how your earned income is going to affect your Social Security, SSI, SSDI, is really important because there are very separate rules. And you want to make sure that you know those rules because you definitely do not, that they will catch you and you will owe that money back to the Social Security office. They will find you and get you. And I've had people that haven't gotten caught for a long time, and then they've owed our federal government like $70,000, I think is the most I've heard. Um, Ben, is there anything you want to add?
Yeah, in this shot, there are some currently incarcerated individuals talking, and they are commenting that they don't have computers in the prisons. And I ended by talking about how some, not all, some prison libraries have the VR application either on the computer or paper-based. John Montag mentioned in the chat about the refer for services where they can have a family member or a friend fill out the application or assist them in filling out the application.
Sure.
There are avenues. Uh, um, Jennifer mentioned she recommends you do it 6 months before, and I would vouch for that. But just remember, you can talk to your librarian. Also, caseworkers. Caseworkers are supposed to be trained on what vocational rehabilitation is. There's also services through Goodwill in some states where they have the paperwork to help guide you through that process. As Jennifer mentioned, it is a very slow process, and I exaggerate slow for a reason because it is slow. It's very bureaucratic in the way that it can be very my computer has been freezing today. Anyway, it is very bureaucratic on the way it works. That every single step has to be approved by somebody and it goes up and up and up and up. It's that type of paperwork. They just want to verify that the funds are used in a certain way and whatnot. So it can be frustrating, but it's definitely worth it. Going off of that, looking at the questions here, you alluded to some of this already, but maybe we could talk about the different types of services. Darn it. Okay. Different types of services that are um, provided. You talked about clothing. You said you have bought uniforms in the past. I think you alluded to transportation at one point, but what other services can VR provide? What do they provide? And what can they provide? Can be two different things sometimes. Like for example, I talked about the human resources assessment, the certification test. that VR people, for me, that's another service that they provided. What else is there? You talked about guest codes, right? Is there anything else, you know?
Well, so there are services that you can get that, as I said, you know, go through a vocational evaluation. You can to determine like what are my skills. You can have just plain job seeking skills. You can have you have your like your core services, which is a job developer. And there's I was an employment specialist, so I did both um, job development and job coaching. So I guess I didn't talk much about coaching. So once you get a position, yay, we get to celebrate. And then you can opt to have a job coach. And a job coach is someone who can be on site. I did a lot of on site because I would work with deaf individuals. So I was interpreting and training, like learning. I would go in, learn the job aside alongside that deaf person and interpret what was going on with the training. I have a very different type of brain because I'm able to most interpreters don't retain a lot of information when they're interpreting. I remember way too much. Um, and it also is important, coach, that you connect, you find some natural supports inside of the workplace. And you just connect them with their coworkers and make sure they have a good relationship with their employer, their boss, their supervisor, whatever it's called. Um, there is like you can also have an off-site coach, and that's where you maybe meet after work, you give a phone call, how's it going, talk about a situation. Okay, so that happened, so next time that happens, think about doing this or think about how you could approach this differently. There's lots of accommodations that we can come in and look at. And I will preface this with let me go back on a little bit of a topic of disability in particular. Not all of us know everything about all disabilities. Like I said, I'm an expert in deafness and deafblind and hard of hearing, and I've lots of experience in mental health and autism. But I can have someone who is deaf and they also have migraines. And I don't know a lot about migraines. So I can get on Jan, as you see, it's posted Job Accommodation Network, and really learn about a disability and how I can go in and approach um, the employer for accommodations. So I've created accommodations where instead of taking your 15-minute break, you take a break, you take 5 minutes every hour. Just to go and maybe just need to decompress. I need to go to the bathroom and wash my face with cold water. And um, we've done accommodations where, you know, we've asked for no perfume or uh, odors because that would enhance or that would trigger a migraine. Um, we've just done a lot of different things. For deafness in particular, we put lights. If you work at a desk, we have a mirror that sits there so they can look and see if people are coming in behind them. Um, we've tables that raise and lower. There's just this, you can't imagine all the accommodations that there are. But if you go to JAN, Job Accommodation Network, you can A, learn about a disability, and B, learn about what accommodations they've done in the past. I've actually called them and walked through certain accommodations. Someone who was visually impaired and like what are some of the newer options because it's hard to stay on top of everything that's new. Um, Especially if you don't work with that type of disability. from my own personal experiences, I also have to be aware of my own skill set and my own biases. I've worked with individuals who have committed some pretty egregious crimes. Um, and learning to say, do I have that skill set? Do I have that ability? What are my biases? And I had to learn very quickly that I was capable of doing this. But some people just aren't. I had an employee who she couldn't put away the biases. She couldn't put the individual before her own fears, concerns, inability to learn. Um, and so she just was never capable of working with those who had a background, who'd been incarcerated. Where I don't know, fortunate is the word, but I have the ability to say, this is my job, and these are people who I need to support. They have every right, no matter what there is, to have a life that includes work. I approach things very holistically, and you have to have all these pieces in place, and it's really important that I know my own biases. Um, and it's not a bad thing to say, I don't think I'm the right person for this. It's really better for the individuals that you're serving. Um, but knowing that about yourself, you'll be able to provide better services. You'll be able to support your individual. Um, and then also working with parole officers or probation. And um, in the state of Ohio, we have to have a relationship with the probation and parole officer. Um, some are great, and some, again, maybe don't know their own skill set. And working with someone who has a disability may not be their expertise, and maybe they shouldn't be doing that. As we all, you know, sometimes we're all thrown into jobs and things that we don't know about. I tend to thrive on learning new things and going through and researching it and finding out about it. And some people, they don't want that. They want everything to be status quo. So working with a person with a disability may not be the thing. I know someone currently who is deaf and is on probation. And I think he's supposed to see that person like once a month. But what ends up happening is the probation officer just text, how's it going? I'm fine. And that's the end of the support that they're receiving. Um, some are very involved and strict, and we follow the rules. And others are like, I don't know what to do with this person, so I'm just going to do what I think I should do. Good, bad. But it is really important to know your skill set when you're working with a person um, who has a disability. Again, job accommodation network, I would consider that the go-to place. And like I said, I've worked for 30 plus years with a lot of disabilities, and I still would go to Job Accommodation Network, Jan, to do some research because technology, accommodations, people are so creative. Um, it's really important.
So with the time left, I'm noticing we have several questions in the Q&A. If you have other questions or something lingering in your head, go ahead and type in that. I'll make sure to ask Jennifer. But let's talk about stigma a little bit because that's the theme of the conference, right? So how does disability stigma impact the re-entering seeking employment, specifically the client?
Well, people and I I guess I'm around it so much that I'm not afraid of people with disabilities. Um, I have an employee who is an amazing human being. She is a master's in social work. But she also has cerebral palsy, so she's in a wheelchair. She has some vision. Um, it's not a vision loss, it's not her eyes, but a visual perception. Like she can't process visual processing. She's also hard of hearing, and she's a little older. Most nobody will hire her because they look at her and they think that she's just broken and um not able to work. I don't see that. I look at more of the positives, but most employers have had very minimal experience working with a person with disability or someone they know who has a disability. Um, Most of us have something, we really do. And um, we can hide it. If you would look at Ben just standing there, they think, oh, he's perfectly normal. And then you realize he has hearing loss, and employers are like, what do I do? And it's scary. That's where a job developer has to come in and really or work with the employer to sell them. We're fortunate. The state of Ohio had a very robust employer relationship team, and then they kind of fell. I don't know why it stopped because in fact, not our current director, but the director before actually was like, dude, you're missing the employer piece. Like you got the clients, you got the VR counselors, but you're missing the employers. Um, and that they've started that up again, and it's better than it was before. And I do believe they're really trying. Ohio does have a court. I've not worked a whole lot with them because it's mostly like a drug and alcohol, like you're in and out of jail because of that reason. So the state of Ohio is trying to recognize that this is an issue and to realize that the supports have to be just slightly different, and you have to have job developers or employment specialists who are familiar with how to connect the job seeker to the right employer. Most of us have relationships with certain employers, um, and we can give them a call and be like, do you need somebody? Do you want somebody? Um, and so that's the key is you have to be a good networker, and you know some of our employers do background checks and some don't. And so knowing those companies that do or don't, or that do and don't care, um, it's a game. I don't know how else to describe it. It's like this little game of like finding the right path, and sometimes it takes a lot longer, and sometimes you know, you're like done. And it does matter. I am not, I don't promote bagging groceries. That's my one. Like everyone's like, oh, they can just go bag groceries at Kroger. And I'm like, I always you would tell my staff, if anybody gets a job bagging groceries, you need to come and have that job seeker come up and say, I want to bag groceries. Because that's always the go-to. Oh, just get them a job at Kroger bagging groceries or Giant Eagle or wherever. Um, it's it's like the my nemesis of like, ugh, never bag groceries. Because they deserve more. And even with janitorial, I get a little weirded with janitorial. But I do know some people that thrive in that. And that is a place that does hire a lot of people with disabilities and people who have been involved in the justice system. But it is my last resort. Um, but working with an employer, you don't want to minimize the disability, but you want to make sure it's very clear how their disability is not going to impact the success. And a lot of times you can even say, well, because they have autism spectrum disorder or the spectrum, you can say, well, he's can do this really well. Um, and they're going to be really focused because they're not going to be chatty with their neighbor. They're going to just be focused on their work. And so that's just really important. Again, to know what job is a good match. It's very important. And to make sure there's a natural supports. Many of our folks that have a disability have a limited support system. And then you throw in people who also have disability and have been involved with the justice system. Sometimes they don't have a very good support system. And so it's really important to make sure that we find those natural supports on the job and in the community. Did that help answer?
John Montag has been posting some wonderful resources in the chat to make sure to check those out. We have about 5 more minutes until we can open for the question and answer that part. Before I get into that, we have several more things to talk about. We could go on for hours, I'm sure. Jennifer did talk a little bit about parole officers, probation officers, and how to strengthen that relationship between the VI counselor and the parole and probation. So I appreciate that. I would like to close this part of the discussion with talking about the VI supports that might be possible for career exploration, development, and workforce training, plus post-secondary education, and opportunity for, formerly incarcerated individuals to go back to college and how VI can support that and that. So I'll give you 3 minutes to answer that question.
So VR will at times allow you, or I say allow, offer to pay for a college or a certification. It's really important that you probably will have to do some type of um, some exploration. And I did not mention career exploration. So career exploration looks different in different places. Here in Ohio, it's really important that you get them maybe a meeting to go in and look around, talk with a professional in that field. We've had people, we had an individual who was interested in being like a chef and also doing some IT work, which is, I felt, two really opposite interests. And so we met and talked to a pastry chef, and then we met and talked to someone who does like programming um and to think what are the two ways that this person would thrive and what's important to them, and if they have been involved in the justice system, is it a good match? Obviously, if you have something that where you've involved money, you probably are not going to get a job that involves money. So it's really important to just go in and explore what's required. If you want to be a chef, where can I go to school? And then you help them research different places. I worked with someone who wanted to be a certified nurse's aide. So we went and visited, I think, 3 or 4 providers of that certification. And then you go in and you ask, okay, I am deaf. How big are the classes? Are they online? Are they in person? Do you offer interpreters? Do you offer tutors. I was used many in previous life, was a certified nurse's aide. So I tend to tutor people who are looking for that career because I get it. And I know how to describe things. That is one of my expertise. I probably would not tutor someone on auto mechanics because that's just not my forte. But career exploration is very important to really figure out what's going to match your background and then what is your skill set. Fast and
Before
furious.
we get into the question and answer, I did have one last question, last thought. We've talked about this before, Jennifer, and I've talked about it with Dr. Montag and several others. My biggest frustration with the VR world is that it often feels like you, not you specifically, but agencies often have a specialist who specializes in disability or like the stuff you specialize in deafness. Often they done deaf clients to you to work with you or other types of disabilities. So you have that. And then on the other hand, you have someone who specializes in formerly incarcerated individuals with background. I remember when Jennifer and I were going through that process, we, well, not we, she worked really hard to find someone who could kind of bridge that gap or work with that person. And we found maybe one person all the way up in Toledo or Cleveland or somewhere. And there was nobody. So I'm finding that to be a common thread the more I work with different states. Where they have someone who knows disability, they have someone who knows incarceration, but there's never together. So, what can state agencies do to improve that in general? How can, I mean, obviously, a good answer would be to offer more training, but that's kind of a blanket answer. So, do you have any last thoughts on how we can merge the two and really help formerly incarcerated individuals who have disabilities? By the way, research shows that 66% of people who are incarcerated have some sort of disability. That's 2 out of 3 people. So you would think VR would be more aware of that. I was like, oh, we need to have that gap. So, what are your thoughts on that before we go to the Q&A?
Well, what I would like to see, um, I don't know what I would do with the counselors themselves, the VR counselors, but when I think about something like where I'm at, where I'm the one providing the direct service, I would love to see the VR system allow almost 2 agencies to provide the services simultaneously. Because having someone who's experienced with disability and having someone um, who understands the justice system is I mean, I get enough of it, but I wouldn't call myself an like uh, like an expert um in justice. I've worked a lot of cases that have it, and a lot of I don't know what I would do. I would almost want something like where you're aligned with another agency, and the only thing that can happen is that we learn more and we provide better services, holistic services. I really emphasize holistic because if if um if you're missing one little piece, it can really throw off the whole life dynamic. Um, Obviously, more education, more training. Um, I don't think we could ever get enough training and learn enough. There's so much to learn, and it's constantly changing. I think that's the one thing in our lives where we know that it's going to change. Um, but that's just my opinion. I don't know that our state VR would do that, but it would sure be nice. Um, because again, 2 brains are always better than one.
One thing I will say, the more I travel, and Dr. Montag, Jennifer Montag, and I are working with 36 different states for our project right now, our disability access in prison project. Um, I'm realizing that some agencies are just unaware of some of these issues or are not really thinking about it. And the more we expose them to it, the more they start thinking about it. Sometimes that's the first step that needs, or not sometimes, that is the first step that needs to happen. Think about it, be exposed to it, and then go from there. There are some states that are doing great things with vocational rehabilitation and working with formerly incarcerated. There are some states that need to pick up the slack. But all right, we have about 5 more minutes. So we have 4 questions in the Q&A. Some of them you've already answered or alluded to at some point, so we won't get to it. If you want to contact Jennifer, um, Dr. Montag posted her LinkedIn, so you can message her on there if you are curious about whatever it might be. But somebody here said that they receive VR services, and they can help with a lot of things, including school business plans. They have helped me get a duck stray, for example. And this is this is always the favorite question of government employees. Have you seen issues with budget cuts?
Um, hmm.
The simple answer is
Yeah,
yes, right?
yeah. I remember several years where our state VR ran out of money in like June and July, and the fiscal year is October to September. And in July, they ran out of money, and you're like, you and it depends on the counselor and how old or new I shouldn't say old, how experienced and how new the counselor is. Um, how to navigate the system is sometimes a skill for an experienced counselor, and knowing how to write the employment plan to include things that may not always be included. Um, Cell phones, I've had them purchase cell phones, and you'd be shocked at what some of the counselors can manage. But yes, budget, it's always about budget. It's always about money.
So, Danny had several questions, and I am going to recommend that you email me and Jennifer. Also, Dr. Montag, you can email her as well. She's pretty knowledgeable. But I will address one of your questions because Jennifer Dudas, I keep talking about 2 different Jennifers here. Jennifer Dudas does have a strong background with autism. The question is, how can someone who's on the autism spectrum and can't do loud noises, how do we get proper steps? Um, how do we get the proper steps to a job setting? I think maybe he means like how to work with the job coaches or with the employees on educating them about loud noises and things like that. I think that's what he's alluding to. So I'll let you
Um,
wrap up with that.
it just, I guess it depends. There's a lot of variables. Um, there's nothing wrong with um, getting earplugs or over the ear um, barrier or headphones. Um, that's always a very simple and inexpensive accommodation. Um, Again, it's going to depend on the job. Um, I could think, oh, I'll go work in a bakery, frosting cake, or make sure that when you're working, you maybe have your back to all the things going on. That works really well for a lot of our folks with autism. So it depends on the job, it depends on the employer, it depends on the place and their skill set. But if loud noises are a problem, I pop on my headset or earplugs, depending on what the person can tolerate. or
All
prefers?
right, I'm really grateful that you came today. When I first started working on the conference, vocational rehabilitation came up. Only one name came in my mind. I know many people, but one name came in my mind for this presentation, and you proved your stuff today with your vast amount of knowledge and vulnerability and bringing that out there. So I'm really thankful for that. Before we wrap it up, I would like Jennifer to give all of us one call for action. So now that you've watched this panel, I would like some of you work with VR, some of you work in the prison, some of you are incarcerated right now, some of you are formerly incarcerated, some of you are family members. So, Jennifer, what would be the one thing that you would want people to do tomorrow to help those who are trying to take advantage of VR services?
Ooh, that's a big question because there's so many. I guess the one thing would be to, I'll say two, like look at yourself and decide what you are capable of doing. Um, and the second thing would be, don't be afraid to speak up. Don't be afraid to ask questions. Um, I love it when people ask questions, because to me, that tells me you are motivated, you are interested, you do want to learn, you do. Um, I'm probably I'm the person that asks the awkward questions because, and I love it when people ask me awkward questions because I think that if you just chip, eventually you're going to break through that ice. And then everybody learns more. Everybody learns something new. So ask the awkward questions. Ask why not. Why can't we do it that way? Why, and maybe there is a history, maybe there is a reason, but I don't know what that is. So ask questions, lots of questions. And if it's awkward, who cares?
Jennifer
Because
is a
that's the only
perfect
way to learn.
example of how we are building things one brick at a time.
Mhm.
That's alluding to the play that I wrote. Anyway, thank you so much for coming today. I'm gonna let Jennifer go. If you want to watch the rest of the session, we'd be more than happy to have you. The next session is re-entry, which really does tie into vocational rehabilitation quite a bit. So I'm really excited to see what the re-entry panel does. Thank you to Adiola for introducing the panel. I just wanted to give her a big shout out because Adiola and Dr. Matthews were the first two people that believed in me beyond Jennifer in terms of employment. Jennifer and I worked for so long to try to find anything. I think I don't know how many interviews I had, but I do know that I had seven job offers that went up and then fell apart. And I'm sure Jennifer's hard work every single time. So just the fact that she does that with so many people and doesn't give up is an amazing thing. And then Jennifer and I finally found Adiola and Dr. Matthews, and we are both very grateful for that. So,
Yeah.
yes, right. All right.
Oh,
Thank you, both of you.
Yeah,
All
it's
right.
a
We
pleasure
have
to
2 more
have
minutes.
them.
So
Thank you.
if the current panelists could go off screen, thank you so much.
Thank you.